Welcome back everyone to the Hello World Guy, and in today's video, this is part number 5 I think of the platformer series, and in this video we are going to get started creating our enemy. So if you remember, in the last video we had this cool guy which is animated now, and we used the Sunnyland package for that. The platformer game assets, they were really cool, and of course I will have a link to all of this, to download all of this, in the description below, and this is all good. So now what we are going to do is create an enemy. Now for the assets we are also going to use the same thing. So that's going to be really easy to do, hopefully. So if I go under the Sunnyland folder and artwork and then sprites, then you can see we have got enemies here. And in here we have got eagle, frog, and a possum, a bunch of different enemies. We are going to get started implementing the frog enemy. So it's got an idle animation and a jump animation. Because that's a frog, it only jumps this. But we might prefer to make it eagle. It basically got this attacking animation, and this opossum has got basically like a walking animation. Now we are actually getting starting with this enemy. So if I go under here, if I select this, you can see this out here, and I can convert this to a floating window, and yeah, that allows me to see it separately. So for some reason I don't really think we can zoom in here. Anyways, I need to go here and dock it back to the inspector. So now we are going to get started with this. So as you can see, this currently doesn't only has a single animation, so we don't need a complicated thing for that. So I'm going to just go under okay, where is it? Go under artwork, in, sprites and enemies, open up opossum and select all of that and drag them in. Now it should automatically recognize that we are making an animation. So I'm going to go under my asset animation folder here, which we have all animations, and I'm going to just call this because this is a single animation, not going to create a separate folder for that. Just call it opossum. Hit enter, and yeah, it appears. I'm going to rename this to uh, like that, opossum, or maybe just enemy, I don't know. Of course it's currently too small, so select all of these and make them have 8 pixels per unit, because that's our correct size for this package. You should only use 8 pixels, do not use more or less. That would be my advice. And if I hit play right now, then this should be working. Now it's not actually way too fast. Let's actually check out the animations. It's really not that fast, to be honest. Let's check out the animation. So let me go under here in animation, select opossum one, and rename that to just opossum, I guess. Anyways, selecting this animation. So if I now select my opossum and hit play, you can see that that's all good, and I'm going to just move it a little bit down. That's better. And this is all good. So yeah, you can see that I can basically play the game, and the opossum should be there, and it should be all right. But of course I can currently just pass through him, and sometimes he is on top of me, sometimes he is not, because yeah, I just make what I'm actually going to do is I want the player to always be the thing on top. So I just going to select the player and make it order on layer something like 10 to make sure that it's always on top of everything else. So it's now on top of that opossum. Even though we are of course going to add in a box collider now. So what I want this opossum to do is basically run along, to that part and then come back to that part, just run according to a path that we provide it with, and just do that, and when it touches the player it will deal damage. So that's the idea that I have. However, I'm actually going to implement that in the next video. In this video we are going to implement the damage system actually. So in order to do that, I'm going to select my enemy, add in a box collider to this, 2D, make sure that's 2D, and then you can see this box collider appear, and go under edit collider, and I'm just going to make it a little like that, a bit it's a bit too large. It's actually sized according to the sprite, so that's the reason it's so large. But now you should see that it's hopefully it's a bit too high. I placed my, but we can now not pass through him. Okay, uh, all right. Yeah, we cannot pass through him, and that's pretty good, I guess. So yeah, that's awesome. And now what we are going to do is with this done, with our enemy done, we are going to make him deal damage to us, because now he's got a box collider on him and everything. So I'm just going to move him down to the ground somewhere like there, uh, yeah, that's awesome. And now we can start creating the damage system. Now for this I'm actually going to go to the my player here. Now it's a nice idea to have a you know a damageable system that can be used again and again. So I'm going to create a new script here called damageable. Now this will represent any object that can be damaged, and we are going to open that script up here in here. And here what we are going to do is first of all remove the two using tags and in here I'm going to just create a serialized field here called private float called default health. This will be our health by default. This will be equal to this, which is equal to 100 I think by default. Yeah, so now we are going to do here is create a private float health, and in the start method start I'm going to create the start method. Here we're going to say health is equal to default health. All right, now we can go to the update method. Actually not the update method. Here I'm going to just create a public void here called damage. Okay, so this damage is going to basically take a float called damage. And actually now what we are going to do is we are not going to allow our health to go below 0, because that might cause some problems in the future when we are actually displaying our health and stuff. So what I'm going to do here is check if if we are going to check, for example, first thing we are going to check is create a float here called new health. Okay, and set that to health minus damage, not multiply, of course. And in here we are going to say if new health is greater than health, oh, it's less than 0, which means that it's gone below 0, then we are going to set new health to 0. Then we are going to set our health to new health, and that should work. So also we are going to make sure that our damage is not, so we are going to make sure that if damage is less than 0, we do not want it to actually increase the health, so we are going to say return, just return. All right, that's really awesome. So this should actually work. So now we are going to add this to our player. So open up Unity, go to player, add a damageable to it. Come on, add in a damageable script. Okay, in here the default health I'm going to leave that at 100. Now in here what we are going to do is of course we are going to deal damage when we actually collide with this. So we are going to go here in our I'm actually going to create an enemy script now. So create a C# script called enemy, drag it. All right, let's compile. While it's compiling, let's actually go and program the enemy script. So in here we are going to do something really simple. We are going to check if the player hits when the player hits the enemy, and when the enemy hits the player basically, and that position we want to damage our player. So first of all I'm going to actually I don't think I need these functions here, and also remove those two stuff. Come on. And then in here we are going to add in an on collider enter 2D. All right, so that's going to be that, and it gives us a collision 2D, not a collider 2D. So we are going to say our collider is going to be equal to that collision dot collider variable. So in here all we need to do is check. We are going to have a damageable here, which is going to be collision dot collider. Actually we want enemies to only damage players. I just remember if we do this it might damage other enemies. So we are going to actually do this in a different way. We are going to say if collision dot collider dot compare tag player, actually not compare tag player, then we will just return, because we only want the enemy to damage the player, not other enemies. Now in here what we can do is say collision dot collider, I guess, or not. Collision dot, can we use get component? No, collider dot game object dot get component damageable. This, and of course we are going to set this to a variable. I think damageable. Let's call it D, I guess. And now what we can do is we can say if d is not equal to null, then we are going to say actually just say d dot damage and damage. So in order to do that, of course we don't have that variable, so we are going to have a serialized field here, serialized field private float damage, by default being like 10. Okay, so yeah, that works. And this damageable system is actually going to be pretty similar to our other damageable system, in which we will have events for handling on death and on damage functions. But to start, if I just hit play, you can see that's our player, and if I touch this enemy, then it should damage me, even though of course that's not visible at all. So in order to do that, we are going to implement some events in our damageable class. So events, if you don't know what events are, then you really should. But in case you really don't have no idea what events are, then this damageable system is pretty much like our other damageable system that we used in the first person game. So make sure to check that out if you don't know what I am talking about. So in here, I'm just going to have a, of course, serialized. This is damageable, right? So okay, I'm actually going to just add in a space here, and okay, like that. And then I'm going to create a serialized field here called a private unity event, and of course that's not visible because that's not available to us because we are not using unity in gen dot events namespace. Okay, this in this unity event it's just going to be called on depth event maybe. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty awesome, and we can basically just subscribe to this event whenever we want. We can also do that in code, by the way, if you want to, but we are going to do it in the inspector instead, so that's the reason it's serialized field. So in here, we are going to whenever we are damaged, we are not actually damaged. So if the new health is less than 0, which means our new health is being set to 0, that means that well, we need to damage, which means that it's dead, it's less than 0. So we are going to say damage, we are going to say on that event dot invoke. Okay, and then we are going to set this dot enable is equal to false, so that we are not okay, it's not this necessarily. Okay, so this should make sure that we don't keep registering the on that event again and again and again. So in player we can create a public void here, just a public void called on that, and all we do in here is we just do debug.log something like ouch, and that should work. So if I go under here, you can see that, you should see that we managed to. So if I hit play, then you should see that when the enemy touches us, we should start to get damage, and alright, that gives us damage. And if I touch him again, I have to touch him again and again for this to actually work. But you can see it's actually not working. Why is it not working? Why? I mean, I have touched him enough times already. So if I select my enemy, he hasn't even got the enemy script. Okay, uh, but I think he will need a rigid body as well. I'm not quite sure about that, but let's try. 10 damage, which means that if we touch the enemy 10 times, it should work. So of course the enemy currently does not deal continuous damage. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Nope, doesn't work. He's not working, and the reason for that is obvious. We have not subscribed to our event listener yet, so we'll have to do that now. So add in a okay, so for the script, add the player script, and for the function, just choose on that. Now let's try this for the final time and see if it works. So if I go now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and this time it should work. No, doesn't. Okay, it does. Okay, so it says ouch, which means that the on death event was called, which means it's all working. Our damage system is now functional. Perfect. So of course we do not want the player to deal damage whenever it touches the enemy. We want the enemy to deal damage to the player continuously. So how can we make it like that? Alright, so now I have changed the code to actually work now, and I didn't record that because I didn't want to show you the tedious typing. So in here, what we are doing essentially is, first of all, I have got a variable here called range, and we have got a two more variable which is serialized, by the way, which will represent how far the enemy can attack the player from, and we have got a game object called player, and we have got a bool called can attack, which is by default true. And in the start method, I just created that. We basically set the player to this game object method called find game object with tag, the tag being player, and it just returns as the object that is with the player, that is the player. And if it's null, which means there is no player in the game, which should never be the case, we are just going to set this script to be not enabled by setting enable variable to false. Alright, so now in the update method, all we do is this is the code we had earlier. So we set damageable d is equal to player dot get component damageable, and if it's not equal to null, then we deal the damage. And for checking whether we want to do that, we use the vector3 dot distance method to get the distance between player dot transform dot position and this object's transform dot position. And if that is less than the range and the player can attack, this variable is true, the enemy can attack, then we basically do this. Now of course this is there's a problem with this, which means that our enemy will continuously attack the player and kill him instantly, because this is being called in an update method. So we need to control how often the player attacks. For this, we need to do is use, well, coroutines. I hope this is just the same system as it was in the SPS series. For a detailed explanation, please watch that. It will be really beneficial. So just use system.collections. In here, we are going to have a private I enumerator here called attack cooldown. And all this will do is it will yield return new wait for seconds. Come on. Wait for seconds, and the amount of seconds will be equal to okay, we will actually have a serialized field for that. A serialized field private float attack cooldown. By default this is going to be like 0.75 seconds. Okay, so in here what we do is we wait for the attack cooldown to complete, and once it's done, before actually doing that, we set can attack to false, and after this is done, we set can attack to true again. So this should work. It will basically wait for a few seconds before the player can attack. Not a few seconds, just 3/4 of a second. But yeah, that should work. So if I go into Unity and hit play, then you should see that everything is working. And if I just go ahead and stand near the enemy and make sure that its range and everything is set correctly, maybe increase the range a bit. Okay, he dies really quickly. Of course that's working, but yeah, that's awesome. And this video is kind of getting long, so we won't be able to implement the health bar in this video. So yeah, stay tuned for that in the next video, in which we will implement the health bar, a couple of animations, and a bunch of other stuff, and then we will implement the enemies moving mechanics. So yeah, I will see you in the next video, and make sure to subscribe, because a majority of you aren't. And so yeah, smash that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video, and bye.